You said something to me earlier in a brief conversation, pre-conversation conversation, that kind of blew me away. You said that your company, Seventh Generation, while in the whole space of sustainability and greenness, was making the world less bad, not good. What do you mean by that?
So, a realization that we had hit in the leg. Can you hear it okay? No?
Bring it up a little.
Is this any better? Better? Do we have a sound guy?
Yeah, you keep up.
Okay. So the realization that we had some years ago, which was a tough realization to have, was that as wonderful the Seventh Generation is, and all the nice things we do and all the nice things people say about us, at the end of the day, what we were doing was making products that are less bad than everybody else. We were consuming energy, we were creating waste, we were encouraging consumption, and we had to face the somewhat painful fact that being less bad is not good enough, particularly in the world that we live in today. And set out on a sort of new mission, which is to be good rather than less bad. Now, that might sound easier than it actually is, because when I say good, I mean good in a holistic sense. So I'm talking about good from an equity and justice perspective, not just an environmental perspective. Good as in, being not just sustainable, because we can't sustain what we have today, we need to be regenerative. So, and when I ask people this question, can you think of something, a product, a service, that is truly regenerative, that is truly good, that is repairing the world? It's hard to think of things. And if you're making toilet paper and dish liquid, it's really hard to think about how you make that transition from being less bad.
That's wonderful. I hadn't really thought about that. So less bad, less harm, as opposed to something positive that creates a greater good, or more good.
A friend of mine runs a company called New Chapter, which is a vitamin company. They are in Costa Rica helping to regrow the rainforest. So they are regenerating the rainforest where it has been cut down, but using the underbrush of that rainforest to grow vitamins and herbs that they actually use in their vitamins. So they have a commercial enterprise that's making commercial products, while at the same time they are actually regenerating the rainforest, bringing back species that had not been there for a long time. That's sort of what we are aspiring to do.
Yeah, that's a different paradigm. That's a very different paradigm. So what you're really suggesting is in fact living a different life and having, I'm going to get there, just give me a moment. It's sort of producing things or services or models or business models or organizational models that heal or that grow, as opposed to do less harm. It's a very different kind of thing. It's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Do you see anywhere in your business where you could iterate toward that direction? Is there anything, can you create shampoos that when they get flushed down actually help the oceans or something like that, or?
The answer is yes. We have not figured out how to do all those things yet, but that's the aspiration. And I think what is important is the willingness to have that aspiration. And I don't want to say that incremental improvement is bad.
Yeah.
What I want to say is that today, given the inequity, global warming, the things that we're facing, incremental change is not enough.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to have that dream, to say, when I do my laundry, I'm going to not only clean the ocean, but bring back some species of fish that is about to die off.
Yeah.
And we need to have those dreams. We need to believe in those possibilities. And then, as businesses, you got to put your money where your mouth is and say, okay, and I'm going to be willing to invest in that possibility, even though I have no idea how to make it happen.
Yeah, at this point.
Yeah.
With the faith that it'll happen as you go forward. I remember talking with Bill McDonough some time ago, and his concept, and he's sort of moving forward on it slowly, but still moving forward on it, is, he says forests grow. It's not as if they don't grow, and sometimes they grow really fast. He's suggesting that it's the chemistry of our life, the chemistry of manufacturing and production, that if you change it in some fashion, and he's got a whole matrix for that, you can still grow as a society, as an economy, without doing the damage that we do to the planet these days. And it kind of falls a little bit into what you're talking about.
I think the challenges, and Bill McDonough has helped us in a variety of ways over the years. I think the challenge we face, I've never checked the stock market as frequently as I have in the past 2 weeks. We are in a crisis that many of us have never lived through before.
Yeah.
And it creates fear, it creates uncertainty. And the last time we had a crisis after 9/11, the vision was go shopping. Well, we have a crisis now, and that crisis needs to absolutely lead to fundamental and radical change.
Yeah.
And the fear that has seized so many people, rightly so, we have to be very careful of. Because that fear is real. But if that fear forces us to retreat, there's already cover stories on newspapers saying, in the financial crisis, will sustainability be the first thing to go?
Yeah.
And as I told you earlier, I wrote a ranting, angry blog post on the plane yesterday because I was upset that Pepsi let 3,300 people go.
Yeah.
And I talked about how you read their vision of the future, and yet when push comes to shove, the most expendable thing is people. Just fire them. And of course, I then found out, because I got an email from the individual at Pepsi, who was in that 3,300 group of people, but their head of sustainability. And I said, this is a danger sign, because if every company does what they're doing, we can't afford to lose that ground.
Well, this is the second thing you really were talking about earlier, the disconnect between what corporations talk about these days and what they're doing. And this is, perhaps one example of that. But you were talking in a grander way about the words that come out of a corporation's mouth and their actual behaviors, and that kind of disconnect, which may be exacerbated now by the financial crisis.
Yeah.
But what were you sort of getting at?
Well, I think it's no surprise, because all we do is read about it every day, that there is all of this greenwashing and people doing what they say they aren't doing, and it's sad, and it needs to be dealt with aggressively, and it is, but more than anything else, as I said before, it's sad because there is this enthusiasm for sustainability and the environment and all these good things, and we can't afford to miss that opportunity. We have to seize that opportunity. And, an interesting story that we went through is, I've spent many, many, many years talking about how terrible Walmart is. And I have been quoted in places that would use the language that I said, is that hell will freeze over before we sell to Walmart.
Yeah.
And I have ranted and raved, and I also did something else, which is I wrote to Lee Scott and said, if you want help, I'm willing to help you. And that was 3 years ago. I announced last week that Seventh Generation was starting to do business with Walmart, expecting a torrent of angry emails. I wrote a very, very, very long explanation of why we made that decision, but I believe that while Walmart still does terrible, terrible things, they are moving in the right direction. And they have gone through terrible economic times over the last 3 years and didn't pull back their commitment to sustainability. Do they have issues with healthcare, with their workers, with the environment? Sure they do. But But I hope that other companies have the commitment to stick with this change that they have shown through what was for them. When the economy is good, their business stinks. When the economy is bad, everyone goes and shops there. And so they're now benefiting both from an improved reputation and a lousy economy.
Well, what are the things that they did? What are the things that they have done, over the last couple of years that caused you to change your mind?
So there are hundreds and hundreds of things that they have done, and they range from having an environment. I was in a meeting with their employees and their senior management, and one of their employees stood up and said, you're talking about all of this healthy, sustainable stuff, and then I go into the cafeteria, and for $1.99 I can buy a slice of pizza which is dripping with oil and a gigantic soda that I can't even finish, but if I want a salad and a bottle of water, it costs me $5.99. I mean, what's the deal here? You're telling us one thing, but you're encouraging different behavior. Well, the next day they had changed the prices in every cafeteria everywhere in the world to make salad and water the same price as pizza. So they range from those little things that no one will ever know about because they're not going to talk about that, to all of the things that they're doing in their supply chain. I mean, they just forced the industry that makes laundry products to take 50% of the size of each bottle out, so that today every bottle of laundry liquid is half of what it was before. Now, that cuts a lot of packaging, it cuts a lot of water. It's good for them because they can sell more stuff on the same shelf space. But they forced the industry to change. They didn't go to the government, they didn't go to the environmental community. They said, we're setting a new standard for what you have to do if you want to sell products in our store. You got 18 months to make the change. I don't care how much you kick, scream, and shout. If you don't make this change, you will not be sold in our store. And you know what? Every manufacturer of laundry products made that change.
That's very impressive.
So there's hundreds and hundreds of stories about that. Now, of course, they're in court because they've been stealing minutes out of people's paycheck in Minnesota to the tune of millions and millions of minutes, and that's disgusting and shameful. But I think they're moving in the right direction.
Okay. You sure you haven't gotten letters from people saying, why are you selling in Walmart?
I will, and I expect to, and I look forward to that debate.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
We're selling to 4 stores, so
All right.
it's not about the money at the moment. Someday we hope to sell to more.
I understand. Well, that also takes us into the realm of discussion about creating a workplace, a good workplace, where people have true opportunity. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, especially in contrast to Walmart?
Yeah. So as I said about business, large business particularly, gives lip service to this idea of human resources being our greatest asset. Yet we know by reading the paper that the best way to correct the shortfall in profitability is to fire people. Very simple, the quickest thing that companies do. We have a stated objective at Seventh Generation to create the best working experience that anyone has ever experienced. I agree with that, man. Hey.
Did you plan this?
Give peace a chance. Thank you. Thank you. If you listen.
Was that a friend or
listen,
a boyfriend or a girlfriend or?
If you're going to be interrupted, that's what you want to be interrupted by, right? So, the aspiration that we have, and it is an aspiration. Most people have a pretty shitty experience when they go to work. They don't stay long, they don't feel like they're treated particularly well, and this is true of nonprofits as well as for-profits. It is not better, I don't think, in the nonprofit world than the for-profit world. We believe, and I'm happy to talk about what we do to fulfill this belief, that what we want to do is create an opportunity for people working at Seventh Generation to become the human beings that they want to become, so that when they come to work, their job and their life is part of a journey that is walking down a road that helps them fulfill some dream that they have. And that business can play a part in facilitating that journey, investing in that journey. And if you want to get a highly productive, incredibly effective workforce, you have to create that potential for people to grow and become who they want to be. Now, if you ask me, well, how can you prove that the money you're investing in doing that? And we have an employee here, Dave Rappaport, who's sitting right in the front row. So he's really the one to ask how well we're doing on this, not me. But we spend 1 day a month, for example. Everyone in the whole company is in a development process that teaches some sort of far out things. I mean, we're talking about increasing people's consciousness. Why would you want to increase people's consciousness at work? Well, because what we've come to discover is that most people aren't particularly conscious of what they're doing, what they're saying, what their effect is on other people, and are not particularly intentional about what they do. And I can tell you that most of what I did yesterday is what I did today and what I'll do tomorrow. And I need to be more conscious, more intentional, so I can break the patterns that I'm in and create new patterns to try to create the kind of company in the world that I'd like to create. And I would say that there is nothing more important than this. Mm-hmm. It's more important than sustainability. It's more important than anything else we do, because if we don't practice creating the kind of world we want to see right within the walls of our company, if we don't create that experience, then, who wants to buy a green product made by a company of people that hate working there? Yeah. I mean, and you know what? That's what's happening in many cases. Yeah. I would say that one of the greatest and most important challenges of our time is to help people along this path, along this journey, to help them through their job and their work fulfill their dreams. Now, sometimes those dreams diverge away from seventh generation and people leave and go and do other things. Not very many people leave, but occasionally it happens. So, and we have been helped by a wonderful woman named Carol Sanford, who we've worked with for 3 years, who has been the architect, if you like, of this process.
Well, earlier, Tony Shea was talking about culture and the importance of corporate culture. But I think you're implying something beyond culture. You're talking about journey and a path to journey and self-fulfillment and awareness. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, and I don't say culture is critical.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, you need, but the traditions that we have and the free massages that you get, or the dogs that are roaming around the office, or whatever benefit, those are the easy parts. Yeah. To create an environment, and I sit down with anyone who wants to sit with me every 6 weeks, and people get to ask any question they want to ask about anything. And I have yet to be asked a question that I was unwilling to answer. Now, to create an environment where there is a culture of people that take advantage of that, we're still working on. Yeah, there's a bunch of brave souls who aren't afraid to ask anything, but most people are in some ways so damaged by their other working experience, they sort of think, yeah, I heard that before. I once said something that was unpopular, and then I didn't get promoted or I lost my job. So it is a hard process, and it does sort of sound far out when you say, when you're talking about consciousness at work. But again, I think that in order for us to succeed and adapt to the challenges we face in the world right now, we really, we are trying to learn about innovation, because as innovative as we are, we think that we don't even really understand what it is. Yeah. But it is the key, we know, to being successful. Mm-hmm. So.
Wow, that's very interesting. What else do you want to talk about?
Talk about something that I think is really important, which is transparency. I don't know, has anyone here read our corporate responsibility report? No, I don't blame you. Not many people do. But check it out. Our corporate responsibility report opens with a story that I wrote about probably the most painful, unpleasant, and difficult experience we had as a company in the past year. And it is a story about a chemical that is in our products that we spent many, many, many years trying to get rid of and had success in getting rid of it, but we didn't do it in a transparent way. So when we were at the tail end of the process of trying to get rid of this chemical, some nonprofit did some testing and announced, not us alone, but 50 companies that had this chemical in it. And it is a suspected carcinogen. And it was the most embarrassing, painful time that I ever went through to have to talk about why seventh generation had this chemical in its product. Now, the lesson was we should have had that conversation with our consumers and our employees and our customers for those 5 years. To talk about, hey, there's bad things in our products. It's not going to make them unsafe for you. It's not unsafe to use the products because it's in there at such low levels. But nevertheless, if we had been honest and transparent about that process over the 5 years, there would be no story because we would have already talked about that. And that is a really hard lesson for business. Business is pained to talk about what it's doing wrong, what it doesn't know, the negative effects it has on society as well as its workers. And what we've learned is that radical transparency, talking about the scariest, the most painful things that you're doing wrong, is critical to create trust and loyalty with all of your stakeholders. And I remember when we started on this journey a long time ago, and we put up on our website, I wanted to put up on our website a list of everything that was wrong with our products. And John Murphy, who is a close friend of mine and the head of sales, said, please, Jeff, don't do this. This is a bad idea. You're going to make my life really miserable. I'm going to walk into every sales call, and on the desk of the buyer is going to be what's wrong with seventh generation products that was left there by our competitor. Well, you know what? Never happened. Because what our competitors knew is that they didn't want to have to answer that same question themselves. That their list was going to be longer and worse than our list. So it never, ever once happened. But people are terrified to talk about what they don't know, what they can't do, what they're doing wrong. And I believe that we really need transparency, and you have to demand it from yourself, you have to demand it from your employer or your own company, and you have to demand it from the companies that you do business with. And I'll end on this note that we as consumers, employees, fail to live up to the effect and the possibility that we can have on the problems that surround us. This is a time more so than ever. I am so excited that Obama is ahead in the polls. But you know what? You can't take for granted that he's going to win the election. And that's a partisan, sorry about that, but anyway. So what I mean is that we all have to take that responsibility and that opportunity to affect change. If there was ever a time in our lives, if there was ever a time in the history of the world where that was needed, it's now. And it starts, I think, with self-reflection and thinking about, hey, what am I doing? Am I doing all I can do? Am I going to, not buy that thing that I'm thinking about buying? I remember I was going to commit to going for a month without buying anything new. And I put it off because the iPhone was coming out, and I said, okay. I said, after I get my iPhone, I'll start. But then there was a watch I wanted. And I realized how addicted I am to buying stuff. It's sick. And I was with a woman from Nike this morning, and in my talk I was saying, one of the most embarrassing things of all is my son collects Nike sneakers. He's got 50 goddamn pairs of Nike sneakers under his desk. And I said, what kind of parent am I? What the hell am I doing wrong?
What'd you teach?
So, nobody's perfect. I'm far from it.
But you're aware of it now. You have that
I'm
awareness.
not afraid. I love going to talk to college students because they love to ask me all the things that I'm doing wrong. And that's a speech unto itself. We'll save that for another day.
That's great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.